It was a quiet morning in Birmingham, the kind where fog drapes the streets like a shroud and memories linger in the corners like shadows that never quite leave. A radio crackled softly in a corner store, playing a classic riff that had once echoed through stadiums across the world. The voice was unmistakable. Raw, haunting, immortal, Ozzy Osbourne. But then the news broke, quietly, almost too quietly. Ozzy Osbourne's occupation, listed on his death certificate. The headlines exploded, not with the announcement of his passing. That wasn't the story. Ozzy, against all odds, was still alive, still breathing, still fighting. But it was that haunting phrase, occupation, listed on death certificate, that stopped fans in their tracks, confused, worried, and wondering. What does it mean when the Prince of Darkness is already being listed in the language of the dead? To understand the weight of those words, we have to go back to a life lived on the edge of brilliance and madness. Ozzy wasn't meant for ordinary. Born in the gray streets of Aston, Birmingham, he was a working-class kid with a voice that didn't quite fit the world he was born into. In those early years, he found himself in and out of trouble, drifting between factory jobs and petty crime. But somewhere between the concrete and chaos, he found music. And through music, he found a door out of the darkness. Black Sabbath wasn't just a band, it was an awakening. The moment that Ozzy's voice met Tony Iommi's guitar, something shifted in the universe. This wasn't pop. This wasn't love songs and sunshine. This was pain, power, truth, and fear. The band's rise was meteoric, but it came at a cost. Drugs, alcohol, and an unrelenting lifestyle began to erode the lines between performance and reality. Ozzy's life became a whirlwind. Decades passed. In a blur of sold-out arenas, smashed hotel rooms, and the lingering sense that the edge he was dancing on could give way at any moment. And yet, he survived. Over and over, he cheated death. Whether it was the infamous quad bike accident, his battles with addiction, or his near-lethal overdose in the 80s, Ozzy became something of a living ghost, ways close to the void, never quite crossing over. That's why the world held its breath when whispers of his death certificate emerged. It happened during the recording of a documentary, an in-depth look at his health struggles, his legacy, and the preparation for what he himself had started to call the final act. Ozzy had insisted on transparency. He wanted his fans to see the truth, not the myth, not the headlines, but the man. In one chilling scene, a legal advisor discusses end-of-life preparations. It's procedural, somber, and jarringly real. The paperwork is laid out. Among it, a draft death certificate, part of estate planning, not a declaration. But then someone notices something. Occupation. Musician. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because in that one word was a lifetime. Not reality star, though the Osbournes changed television forever. Not celebrity, though he was every inch an icon. Not entertainer or showman, just ... Musician. It was simple. But it was sacred to Ozzy. The stage wasn't just a place to perform. It was his sanctuary, his battlefield, his church. And despite everything, his public breakdowns, his private pain, the diagnoses, the years that seemed borrowed, he never stopped being a musician. When Parkinson's disease began to chip away at his mobility, he didn't retreat. He recorded. When doctors warned him to slow down, he found ways to keep going. He released new albums, collaborated with artists half his age. He gritted his teeth, walked through pain, and kept singing. Because what else was he going to do? There's a scene in that same documentary where Ozzy stands backstage, moments before a surprise appearance. He's frail, shaking. But when the lights go up and the roar of the crowd hits him like a wave, something ancient awakens. His spine straightens. His hands stop trembling. And for a few minutes, he is young again, immortal again. That is what the word musician on that certificate means. It means that no matter how many labels the world tried to slap on him, madman, addict, clown, legend, he chose his own identity. He wrote it in riffs, screamed it in lyrics, bled it on stages. And even in planning for the end, he made sure the world would remember him not for his chaos, but for his creation. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a final, quiet declaration, because Ozzy Osbourne never needed to say goodbye with words. He'd already said everything he ever needed to. Through his music, the listing of his occupation on a draft death certificate isn't a sign of the end. It's a reminder of a life lived loudly. A man who, through all the noise, made the world. Listen, ... And maybe that's the true magic of Ozzy Osbourne. Not that he defied death, but that he redefined life. One screaming chorus at a time, because what is life if not a song? A sequence of moments, some loud, some quiet, that when strung together, make up a melody. Ozzy's melody was never soft. It was jagged, raw, and electric. It was the kind of song that didn't just play through speakers, it grabbed you by the soul and made you feel something. So when that time finally comes in someday, his certificate may be printed in black and white, but the life behind it, well, forever echo in electric color. Each note will carry the weight of rebellion, of defiance, of choosing to live unapologetically. Each scream will remind us that even in pain, there is power. That even in madness, there can be meaning. It will echo in the eyes of the fans who stood for hours in muddy fields just to feel a spark of his fire. It will echo in the voices of young musicians who first picked up a guitar because they heard Iron Man in their dad's car. It will echo in the quiet moments to those unexpected flashes when you hear a distant chord and remember what it felt like to be alive in the age of Ozzy. And in that echo, he becomes more than a man. He becomes myth, legend, anthem, even decades from now, when technology has changed and tastes have shifted. That sound, that unmistakable howl of a man who once bit the head off a bat and then cried when his dog died, will remain. Because authenticity never fades. Because truth, screamed loud enough, can echo forever. So no, the black and white of a certificate can never contain him, because Ozzy Osbourne is not a name on a document. He is thunder made flesh. He is grief turned into melody. He is the reminder that you don't have to be perfect to be unforgettable. You just have to be real. Because the truth is, perfection never inspired anyone. But realness touches hearts. Ozzy didn't wear a mask to be loved. He wore his pain, his madness, his joy, his absurdity all on his sleeve. He stumbled, he fell, he laughed at himself, he cried publicly. And in doing so, he gave everyone watching permission to be human too. And for every kid who ever felt like an outsider, who didn't belong, who carried darkness in their chest and didn't know what to do with it, Oz lit a torch and said, "Follow me." He didn't promise them salvation. He didn't promise that it would get better overnight. What he offered was something more powerful: companionship, understanding, the knowledge that you weren't alone in your rage, your confusion, your sorrow. He sang what many were too scared to say. He screamed what others bottled up. When society pushed the misfits to the edge, Ozzy gave them an anthem. When the world said, "You're too strange," he said, "Good, stay strange." And it wasn't just metaphorical. There were real kids in real towns with real pain who turned on their stereos and found a friend in Ozzy's voice. A 15-year-old boy in Ohio who just lost his mother. A girl in Brazil with scars on her arms. A lonely teenager in Tokyo with metal posters on his wall and a heart too heavy for words. They all heard him. And for a few minutes, they felt like they belonged. Because Ozzy didn't just perform music. He became the mirror that reflected the parts of us we were too ashamed to look at. And in that reflection, there was freedom. He was chaotic, yes. But chaos can be honest. He was wild, unpredictable, even foolish at times. But he never lied about who he was, and for a generation suffocating under the weight of expectation. He was a breath of unfiltered air. Ozzy wasn't trying to be anyone's hero, and that's exactly why he became one. He taught us that sometimes strength looks like survival. That bravery is showing up even when your hands are shaking. That madness isn't the absence of meaning, but sometimes the birthplace of. He showed us that music doesn't have to be polished to be powerful. That truth isn't always pretty, but it's always worth hearing. That sometimes the most broken voices carry the most beautiful stories, and that story, his story, became a lifeline for the misfits. The lost, the dreamers, the damned. He gave them more than music. He gave them identity, culture, tribe. Metal wasn't just sound, it was armor. Ozzy taught them how to wear it. He reminded them that it's okay to howl at the moon, to question everything, to bleed through your art. That even in a world that often felt cold and hollow, there was still magic in distortion pedals and drum solos. So when he said, "Follow me," it wasn't a call to fame or fortune. It was a call to feel, to live, to burn with everything you've got before the light fades, and they followed. Not because he was perfect, but because he was true. To this day, the ripple of that truth hasn't stopped. It's in the way a kid picks up a guitar and doesn't care if they know the chords. It's in the tears of a grown man at a reunion concert remembering what Ozzy meant to him when no one else understood. It's in tattoos, t-shirts, tribute bands, in basement jams and midnight playlists. Ozzy lives there. He lives in the noise, in the rebellion, in the healing. He may have been called the Prince of Darkness, but in the lives of millions, he was the spark that lit their way out of it. So when we say he is thunder made flesh, it's not just poetic, it's the truth. He came rumbling into our lives, loud and uncontrollable, shaking foundations and waking sleeping souls. When we say he is grief turned into melody, we mean he turned pain into poetry, wounds into riffs. He gave sorrow a soundtrack and somehow made it bearable. And when we say he's the reminder that you don't have to be perfect to be unforgettable, we say it with reverence. Because that's what he showed us over and over again. Scars are not flaws, they are history. He taught us that being real is the bravest thing you can do, and we followed.